Good evening. In this broadcast, the information program Time. Today, the President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, began his official two-day visit to Belarus. During the first day, the main topic of discussion between the leaders of both countries were economic integration and two-sided military cooperation. Traditions, which, in the practice of Russian-Belarusian relations of the last years, were mutual announcements at specific moments of the inviolability of ties between the two countries. This was not bypassed by the Presidents Yeltsin and Lukashenko, who today are signing a large-scale agreement on friendship and cooperation between Russia and Belarus. Arriving to Minsk with Boris Yeltsin are Russian ministers who will conclude several agreements as well. The brother Slavs demonstrate to their other partners in the CIS fully realistic models of mutual integration of the two countries. This is how observers summarize the final results of today's Russian-Belarusian talks and the signing by Boris Yeltsin and Alexander Lukashenko of an agreement on friendship and cooperation between the two countries, and by the ministers of those countries an entire series of other agreements. Only among the activists of the Oppositional National Front of Belarus, these strictly peaceful documents evoked hostile feelings because they discern in the agreement a clandestine threat to Belarusian sovereignty. However, in the opinion of analysts, the practical repercussions of the agreement are just as beneficial to Russia as Belarus, and the apprehensions that economic agreements will place Belarus in a position dependent on Russia appear without basis. We have embarked onto concrete deeds in realizing the framework agreements which we previously had signed, which was unimaginable for other countries to this date, and especially in the framework of the CIS. Here we have concrete questions of military technical cooperation and border and customs, and even to the point of creating joint companies, joint financial industrial groups, etc. No one is in a losing position. Everyone has won, they and we. How does Europe exist? There is a European Union. You know the European Union. All of them, the 16 countries, are independent, sovereign, decide on all domestic and foreign policies independently. But considering the fact that they are within this union, they coordinate all policies amongst each other. And in this connection, individual expenditures are less. The meeting planned for today of the command of the federal forces with the authorized Dudaev representatives did not take place. As a correspondent of Vitas was told by the advisor of the president of Ingushetia, Pyotr Kosov, the Chechen delegation headed by the vice premier of the Dudaev government, Dushi Amaliev, was not allowed to pass by the Ministry of Internal Affairs forces over the border between Chechnya and Ingushetia. The talks were planned for Nazran. In downtown Grozny, where just recently fierce fighting was underway, the Ministry of Emergency Situations is unfolding its emergency rescue work. Rubble is being sifted through, the dead are being exhumed, and communications are being restored. A small regiment of rescuers near a tiny oasis called the Tablet here, on 2 Zeal vehicles, are transporting out the injured, ill, or people exhausted by war, hunger, and cold to hospitals outside the city. The rather brief truce period permitted the Ministry of Emergency Situations services to organize purification of the Sunja River water and delivery of the water to several regions of Grozny. According to agreement with federal forces, representatives of the regiment of Aslam Mazhadov, escorted by internal affairs forces, were permitted into the city for the removal of killed gunmen. Near the auto terminal, where the talks were held, an exchange of lists of prisoners of war was held. However, on the very next day, the Marine Infantry Pacific Fleet regiments positioned here were attacked by Dudaev fighters. The goal which they are pursuing is to attack our front posts and sow panic, and also to get through to the exchange point with the aim of impeding the removal of the bodies, and I think subsequently to accuse our side of this very thing. The choice is difficult. The clash was difficult, and it lasted from between 1520 to 2030. The attack was rebuffed, and the attacking regiment was in essence annihilated. After that incident, the truce, which at that is quite relative, is finally disrupted. However, active combat operations have not yet begun, and federal forces and the unlawful armed formations are preparing for the 23rd of February, the traditional celebration of the Russian army and the Black Date of the Chechens, who on that day in 1944 were deported. A new bomb attack on the south and southeasterly regions of Grozny, controlled by Chechen formations, and the city Argun was dealt today at approximately midday, Interfax was told by the head of the information service of Chechnya, Vladi Udugov. According to his assertion, the bombing is executed by long-distance aviation planes from high altitude with heavy bombs. Last night, the federal forces attacked the posts of unlawful armed formations, from which Saturday an assault was launched on positions of Marine infantry. This, the agency TASS reported. As a result of the bombing, the prominent elevated area in the industrial part of Grozny has been seized. The same night, according to TASS, aviation blows were dealt on reinforcement points of Dadaev near Gudanmes, Argun, and the village Samashki. According to information from Chechen sources, one of the Russian planes was shot down, but in the headquarters of the Russian Air Force, the report was refuted. The head of the information service of Chechnya, Vladi Udugov, told TASS that this morning Russian forces attempted an assault along the entire line of contiguity to the south of Grozny. According to Udugov's version, Russian forces weren't able to penetrate the defense line of Chechen formations, but as a correspondent of Interfax in the village Chernarechye reported, near the last stronghold of Dadaev in the Grozny area, the Russian combat technology in essence has closed off the route Rostov-Baku, the only route used to supply gunmen to the southwestern suburbs of the Chechen capital. Residents of Chechen villages receiving news of the approach of Russian tanks are abandoning their homes and attempting to flee to the village Urus-Martan, known for its anti-Dadaev stance. A representative of the Russian command told Interfax that after the gunmen violated the ceasefire agreement, no new talks have been held. By the evening, the 21st of February, Russian forces completed the blockade of Grozny from the southwest. Correspondent of Interfax witnessed artillery rounds shot every 10 seconds. Among insurrectionists and locals, there are casualties. One of the Chechen field commanders told Interfax that headed toward Grozny from the village Al-Hayurt and Samashkin reinforcements are on their way. Today in the Podolsky hospital in the Moscow military district, the head commander of the infantry ground forces of Russia, Vladimir Semyonov, presented combat awards to soldiers and officers injured in Chechnya. In any war, it's most difficult for the infantry. Just through the Podolsky hospital during the Chechen War, 397 military servicemen were treated. For the majority of those awarded, today the war ended. Privates, after their recuperation, will be sent home, and officers, of course, will continue their service. The Prime Minister of Russia, Viktor Chernomyrdin, today signed a resolution of the government on additional measures to restore the economy and social sphere of the Chechen Republic. The resolution provides for the creation of a state commission, which will be headed by the first deputy vice premier of government, Alexis Kovets. Therefore, as of today, the government team overseeing restoration of the Chechen Republic meets as a government commission. In two parts of Grozny, bazaars have begun to operate. With this only joyful news, Islambek Khazriev began his presentation. All subsequent information was desperate in nature. Of the 500,000 population of Grozny, 140,000 remains. All multi-story buildings have been destroyed. There's no electrical power, water, or food. Is Grozny threatened by hunger? No. In Grozny, there's already hunger. There is already hunger there. It's no threat. There is a true, real hunger there today. The most dangerous is the epidemiological situation. The population hasn't washed in 3 months. On the streets of the capital, 1,500 bodies haven't been removed. Despite all, including Muslim laws, the bodies are often mined. Yet the Republic is preparing for the sowing season. The Ministry of Agricultural Industry this week will begin delivery of seeds and fertilizer. The military have established a schedule for construction on safe areas. In 3 days, summaries of salary payments to the budget sphere employees will be prepared, and yet the central bank is not yet ready to set up a Republican bank, which in the opinion of the Commission delays the receipt of money by the Republic. Truly, the problem is mostly that there is no money for now. However, according to the first Deputy Minister of Finances, the money is being prepared already, and for now all expenses will be absorbed through the ministries and territorial departments. Today, Chechnya needs 15 billion rubles, and yet they are still shooting there. How long possibly will the combat continue? If the combat operations are accompanied by such massive bombings and artillery blows, then you have to understand peace will not come soon. The president of Ingushetia, Ruslan Alshev, stated that currently intensified telephone consultations are underway on the questions of dialogues being held on the level of state delegations between Russia and Chechnya. According to Interfax, several times he phoned the Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin in the apparatus of the government, which Alshev stated at a press conference in Nazran today. Next week, the first Vice Premier of Russia, Alexis Kovets, will fly to Mozdok, who must directly become involved in this matter. In Nazran, Wednesday, the Conference of Soldiers' Mothers of Russia will be held with an agenda containing a range of mothers' actions to prevent bloody events in Chechnya. Today, to the railway station Nazran, a complement of delegates of the conference arrived. That's almost 200 soldiers' mothers from more than 20 cities of Russia. The President of Russia, Boris Yeltsin, issued a decree on material support for veterans of the Great Patriotic War, heroes of the Soviet Union, and full recipients of the Order of Glory living on the territory of the Baltic states. Prior to respective agreements being concluded for this category of veterans of the Great Patriotic War, a lifetime monthly material support payment is established, 10 times larger than the minimum salary for labor established by federal law. The names of these people, many generations of Russians will still know through textbooks. They are the heroes of the Great Patriotic War, marshals, generals, and admirals. On the eve of the Day of the Defender of the Homeland, they were hosted in the Federative Council building. What causes concern to the front fighters these days? According to the chairman of the Pan-Russian Committee of War Veterans, the General of the Army, Vladimir Govorov, defenders of the homeland are still lacking in residences and medications. The frontal fraternity is disintegrating in the CIS, and those who defend the homeland are remembered only on holidays. And yet the veterans were particularly concerned by the fact and the news that because of construction, the annual anniversary parade may not be held on Red Square. Vladimir Shumeka and the Vice President of the government, Yuri Yadov, said that the ritual of the celebration, the government is coordinating with veterans organizations and will submit for signature to the President. It's planned that the anniversary parade will be held on Red Square and on Poklonnaya Hill, a triumphant unveiling of the memorial to victory. And now about what the veterans think about their descendants. The youth are like the youth. They were always contentious and critical, most of all, with great claims for the future. Faith in the Russian soldier, the faith in the valor of our generals and officers will not be shaken by the Chechen affairs. The problem of reforming the Russian army, alternative service, and conscription of students were objects of discussion at the commissions on the problems of science, education and culture and human rights within the Commons Chamber under the President of Russia. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister Viktor Chernomyrdin at today's meeting with representatives of the faction, Women of Russia, made significant statements on these issues. 19 representatives of the fairer gender, the Duma faction, Women of Russia, met in the government building with Viktor Chernomyrdin. The aim of such meetings, which lately intensively are held by the Prime Minister with factions of the Duma, in direct dialogue, are an attempt to resolve questions accumulated on both sides. The talks began in a friendly atmosphere and evidently was all-encompassing because it lasted not as planned in the protocol for 1.5 hours, but much more. Among discussed problems, one may single out the following: the social position of women. Here, the factions representatives demanded support from the government for national producers of industrial goods. And finally, the question was clarified about abolishing extensions for conscription into the army. Viktor Chernomyrdin, as the chair of the Commission on Reforming the Army, assured the participants of the meeting that the government is not preparing anything in this area, and rumors on this are nothing more than initiatives of the Ministry of Defense. The catastrophic situation with medical service in Russia, on the faction's proposal, they decided to isolate into a separate issue and examine the unsatisfactory work of the Ministry of Healthcare at a special session. We have our principal positions and will not retract. If we are against privatization of state general academic institutions, we will defend this position and will support the moratorium law on privatization over 3 years. But we're not against private property. We're saying, let's draft a law. And in general, after the meeting, it was learned that Viktor Chernomyrdin intends intends to introduce the practice of inviting several factions to meetings of government. It looks like the first will be the women of Russia. While the commander of the 14th Army of Russia, the General Alexander Lebedz, refutes news from foreign sources of mass media that he ostensibly intends to run for the post of president of Russia, he evidently does have prospects of trying his hand in big politics. Today in Moscow, representatives of all regional divisions of the Russian Union of Afghanistan Veterans at a special conference decided to define their objectives in the impending political battle for deputy seats in the Duma and in the 1996 for the post of president of Russia. The Afghan vets today discussed the candidacy of General Alexander Lebedz, also an Afghanistan veteran, as a representative of the Union at the 96 elections, agreeing with the General Varenyka that the Afghan veterans should justify the hope the people for the rebirth of the homeland. Participants of the conference decided that they should not play to the tune of various political forces. 162 delegates from 46 regions adopted an appeal to the citizens of Russia in which they described Chechen events as a national tragedy. The country was brought to this tragedy, in their opinion, by the garrulous but truly empty people to whom voters themselves entrusted their votes. Yet the chairman of the Veterans Union, Franz Kininsevich, feels that participation in political battle is not the important thing. The important thing is to implement all social programs and take care of the Chechen vets. This is also the opinion of Boris Pastukov, who worked in Afghanistan for a long time. For them, the union doors are open. For them, the rehabilitation centers are open. And they will find support, including material aid, from the Union of Afghanistan Veterans. In the opinion of experts, today the Afghan movement presents a serious political force because in one way or another, 9 million Russians consider themselves to be members. The mayor of Moscow, Yuri Lushkov, signed instructions to organize free meals for the needy citizens, Interfax reports. The prefectures of administrative districts of Moscow are instructed, together with local organs of social security, to define those people needing this aid. In each district, there's a recommendation to set up base outlets for public meals, which specifically must service the needy citizens. Land reform in Russia, in the 4 years of its implementation, could not reach its main objective, that was to improve the use of land and increase effectiveness of agricultural manufacturing. This was stated today by the Vice Premier, Alexander Zaviruka. In the press conference today dedicated to the address of the President to the Federal Assembly, the Vice Premier, Zaviruka, emphasized that which we constantly say, that the agricultural industrial sector of our country should, together with legislative support of all reforms conducted in our country, should have solid financial state support, and this was what was reflected in the address today. In conversation with specialists of the Ministry of Agricultural Industry, with some heads of the administrations, there is a pessimistic thought pervasive that may God grant that we at least sow half this year. I understand the difficulties facing the leadership in the regions these days and face us in the government, and we, after all, are also searching means of support, not simply like last year when we dispersed 8 trillion in credits at a full percentage rate. We are focusing more now on stable manufacturing facilities. It's a very complicated process, especially since we've organized such a method today of forming food funds, such as regional and federal levels. The regions themselves have taken over these concerns. They are resolving the problems of providing fuel, using final goods as collateral, through calculating local taxes, etc. Especially we will not disperse credits or loans, but we will issue advances against finished goods. And we do have such means. Therefore, I'll assure you that we'll complete the spring sowing season. We won't decrease surface areas. Whether such optimistic predictions will come to pass, we'll find out very soon. Today in the Star Village, the presentation of the new Russian-American space crew was held, which should be launched next month. The press conference was broadcasted to the United States. Hello and good evening. These were the only words which the American combat pilot, bomber, aviator, and astronaut Norman Taggart knew in Russian when he came to Moscow to the Star Village to prepare for his flight. But today American journalists were offended because they said it would be good if he said something in his native tongue and not Russian. I can no longer write in English. Today, the basic crew was confirmed: Vladimir Dezhurov, the commander; Gennady Strigalov, board engineer; Norman Taggart, the citizen of the United States, research cosmonaut. The second crew has a complicated mission. Anatoly Solovyov, Nikolai Budarin, and Bonnie Dunbar, after the launch, will fly to America to be among the American crew for the shuttle flight. On the American astronauts' shoulders, among the Russian crew, will fall the weight of medical experiments, distance probing, material research. Therefore, work is enough for 4 months. And the Americans themselves note that all the experiments are needed on Earth. But how do they relate to the technology which will launch this crew into the Earth's orbit? Are you certain that the rocket will lift off, that on the ship everything will function? Are you confident in the technology you're flying? Yes, I'm confident and believe it. I think in this regard there are no doubts. Without a doubt, I'm confident that everything will be well and all systems will function normally during the flight. The apprehension of Russian specialists on the fate of the space program are not in vain. The experiment, signed by Gore and Chernomyrdin, is in full swing, but will it be completed? This is a question for our government. Or else the station will have to be closed down and preserved, and it will perish. The matter is money. Today, the Russian National Library, all 89 ancient manuscripts stolen the 11th of December were returned. Thanks to the efforts of special services, Russia has kept its national treasures. A few months ago, the invaluable philosophical works of Chinese, Mongolian, Tibetan thinkers and Indian manuscripts on palm leaves and papyrus, irreplaceable books, were stolen from the National Library. Brought to Russia 2 centuries ago by Father Joachim, they seemed to have disappeared without a trace, but soon the thieves were detained, and today the priceless books were returned to the library. Being prosecuted in this regard is Dmitry Yakubovsky, being held in a Petersburg prison. Involved in the scandalous theft from the National Library are as well 6 citizens of Israel. The basic work is being conducted on the territory of Israel. None of the perpetrators of the theft were ever citizens of Russia. What is the role of Dmitry Yakubovsky in this matter? Because all of the stolen antiquities were recorded in international catalogs, they could be sold only on the black market. Therefore, it's not excluded that the theft was for hire. And General Zima, who had extensive contacts, was to help send the priceless manuscripts abroad. But possibly the arrest of Yakubovsky has a political overtone. The investigative body denies this version. The Parliament of Estonia today adopted a new law on language. Estonia's national language is declared to be Estonian, all the rest are foreign. Unlike the previous law, which forced officials to respond to visitors in Russian if the latter does not know Estonian, the new law permits communication in another language, but only with the consent of the official. If such consent is not given, the visitor must provide for a translator and pay services. Meanwhile, according to our correspondent's reports in Tallinn, lately the procedure of crossing the Estonian-Russian border has become more complicated. The matter is that in Estonia there are simultaneously several types of passports in effect. The rules for crossing the border with these documents change so frequently that it's difficult to even follow information about the procedure of leaving and entering. The last time the procedure for crossing the border was changed only a week ago. But this time instructions came from the Russian side, because on the 6th of February the time limit ran out for the visa-less regime for border crossing for citizens without citizenship. The Embassy of Russia in Tallinn immediately approached the Russian government with a petition that the non-visa regime should be extended for these individuals. According to the last reports, Russian border officials have received instructions not to impede border crossing for the aforementioned category of individuals, but according to Estonian newspapers, there is confusion at the border which continues. If one considers that individuals without citizenship in Estonia number in the tens of thousands and almost all of them have friends or relatives in Russia, one may understand the urgency of this issue. Despite the proximity of the borders and spirituality, the Moldavian-Romanian relations aren't simple, greatly caused by the political instability in Pridnestrovia. And although the agenda of the official visit to Moldova of the Prime Minister of Romania, Vocarol, provided for the examination of problems of economic and cultural nature, yet everyone expected the answer to the main question: is Romania claiming reunification with the Moldavian Republic? To it, the Prime Minister Minister of Romania answered unequivocally no, and hence removing the series of subsequent questions. During the meetings and talks among the higher leaders of the Republic, they discussed problems regarding creating joint companies, developing cultural ties and tourism. On them, several agreements were signed between the Republic Moldova and Romania. The Russian Federation and the Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina established official relations as of today. The ceremony of exchange of respective papers was held today in the Russian Foreign Political Department. At the special session of the British Cabinet, a framework agreement was approved with Ireland to create a new political system for Ulster. The process of establishing peace in Northern Ireland enters hence its final phase. For now, the contents of the document is kept secret. The agreement will be revealed tomorrow in Belfast. And yet it became known that Ireland will remove its constitutional demand for the return of Ulster, and Great Britain will introduce an amendment to its law on Northern Ireland, which confirms the sovereignty of London over Ulster. The Prime Minister of France, Edouard Balladur, dismissed accusations that he had sanctioned the illegal tapping of telephone conversations by the police. He has taken under protection the Minister of Internal Affairs, Charles Pasqua. Watergate French style, the bugging of telephone lines by Dr. Maréchal, the father-in-law of the investigator Rick Alfer, who was investigating financial abuses, caused a serious political crisis in France. The head of the criminal police has resigned. Jacques Franquet, the Minister of Internal Affairs himself, immediately returned from Marseille to Paris for consultations with the Premier. In the capital of Somalia, Mogadishu, an international military operation, the Unified Shield, is underway. Marine infantry from the United States and Italy are involved, backed up by military ships of Western countries. Arriving in Mogadishu airport were Russian transport planes rented to the UN. The aim of the operation is to oversee and control the withdrawal of combat technology in the last units of the Blue Helmets from Pakistan, Egypt, and Bangladesh out of Mogadishu. They've been participating in the two-year effort of the UN to stop the civil war in Somalia and help the warring clans to create a sole civil administration. The UN has succeeded in stopping famine among the war-torn Somalians. However, unsuccessful were the attempts at reconciling the warring clans. Today, as 2 years ago, a ruthless war is underway for leadership in the country between the supporters of the two prominent leaders of the clans, the General Farah Aidid and Ali Mahdi Mohammed. It's possible the war will flare again after the withdrawal of the UN forces. The two-year UN operation in Somalia has clearly shown the limitations and capabilities of the United Nations. If in the major wars between political groups and leaders, either in Somalia or other countries, there is not a thirst for peace but for war, no forces in the world, even under the UN's blue flag, can force them to lay down their weapons. The director of the Federal Service of Counterintelligence of Russia, Sergei Stepashin, arrived today in Ankara on a two-day visit. As a correspondent of Vitortas learned, the director of the FSK intends in Turkey to discuss questions of cooperation in the battle with terrorism, the narcotics business, and also left and right extremism. Stepashin intends to inform official Ankara on the situation in the Chechen Republic. In the Brazilian city Corumbá, which is on the border with Bolivia, the federal police have found a large lot of narcotics, 61 kilograms. And only within half a year, only in this area, they've already confiscated 2 tons of cocaine and 3 tons of marijuana. The abundant catch has ended up into the nets immediately after the complete replacement of all the employees of the federal police employed there, which, as it turned out, were all bought out by the drugs mafia. The Latin American drugs business more often uses Brazil's extends territories as their staging point, and mostly in shipping cocaine from Bolivia, Peru, and Colombia to the countries of Europe, Asia, and North America. A significant blow on the unsuspecting narcotics mafia was dealt in Rio de Janeiro, where for the 4th month, an unprecedented in scale joint operation of the army and the police against organized crime is underway. These smaller dealers have a greater difficulty in smuggling their goods through the Brazilian border. Who could even guess, for example, that all of this clothing is permeated with a solution of 15 kilograms of cocaine. The baggage belonged to a Spanish passenger. Packages and ampules with narcotics powder are stuffed inside bodies of dogs, reptiles, poisonous spiders, and even snakes. Several wagons of a cargo train were derailed today during the train's entry into the tunnel, which is under the English Channel. As a representative of the Eurotunnel company said, the occurrence happened on the English territory at the moment when the head wagon and locomotive were already in the tunnel, after which the inspectors made the decision to disengage the rear of the wagons and allow the train to continue through to France. The reason for the occurrence are being clarified. And again from France, a 120th birthday was celebrated by the French woman Jeanne Kalman. She was born in 1875 and at one time met with Van Gogh and as well remembers the first films of the Lumiere brothers. Jeanne has outlived 17 French presidents. At the age of 100, she rode her bicycle, and only a few years ago she gave up her traditional glass of wine and 2 cigarettes a day. Now the woman of many years cannot move about on her own, is virtually blind and can't hear. If one believes the World Book of Records, the palm of supremacy in longevity, incidentally, still belongs to the Japanese man Izumi, who died at the age of 120 years, 230 days. In the zoo of the American city Denver, there's an addition. These cute white polar bears are taking their walk for the first time. During the first year, the babies will be watched, and later these rare animals will embark on a distant voyage of return to Alaska. The Cat's House. Today, this is not only a memory about a wonderful children's story, but the name of a new Muscovite theater, which will open its doors for children on the bright holiday celebrated the 8th of March. 100 kiddies who really love Whiskas. 30 actors are involved in their last preparations before the audiences arrive, and they waited for this moment an entire 5 years. What are the employees of the theater really proud of, and personally its director, Yuri Kuklachov? That is the fact that in order to establish the theater, money from business circles was not solicited, but actors found a rare understanding for days among government structures, the Ministry of Economy, Ministry of Finances, and the administration of Moscow. The first 3 presentations will be performed for those people who helped build the theater. You see fragments of the first show. A children's theater should remain a children's theater, a pure theater, because when you come home to an animal and you press it to your heart, and it begins to purr. And you can't be angry or irritable any longer because the cat will run away from you. You become kinder. This is what a clown said. Last information in continuation of the theme you heard yesterday in the program. There will be no ban on advertisement in Russian public television. The issue is only a voluntary, temporary self-restriction. This was the comment made in an interview to a correspondent of HRTELS on the decision of the Board of Directors of the joint stock company, Public Russian Television, by a member of that board, Igor Shodrasulov. That was my last bit of information. Ahead is still the sports news. All the best. Good evening. In the beginning of our broadcast about hockey today, in the tournament of the International Hockey League, 7 matches in the Western Zone. At this hour, we have 5 results. The Army Wings of the Soviet 0-3, Dynamo Pardo Gawa 7-2, Spartak the Severstal 5-2, Crystal Elektrostal Sokol 4-2, Torpedo Nizhny Novgorod Torpedo Yaroslav 0-1. In the match of the European basketball tournaments, the women's Army team had hosted the Turkish Galatasaray. The Russians confidently went through the whole match and won 94-55. The decisive match between these teams for the quarterfinals will be the 23rd of February. For the first time, the Russian snowmobile championships occurred in Tyumen. As usually successful was the team from Novy Urengoy, and its representative Igor Milentiev won the title national champion. And upon the end of the race, 5 racers were named who on the 20th of March will compete in Sweden in the European Championships. In Ashgabat at the international soccer tournament involving the CIS teams, the local Kopendok won in the finals, beating the Olympic team of Turkmenia 2-0. The first prize for the victors was $7,000. In the Spanish city Haka, the winter ski competitions, the Russian student skiing team, consisting of Irina Krupushova, Yulia Milenchuk, and Olga Kosnacheva, won the relay race 3 by 5 kilometers with a result 42 minutes, 59.8 seconds. In Stuttgart, at the major tennis tournament, the Grand Prix, in the first series, Evgeny Kafelnikov easily defeated Peter Korda from the Czech Republic 6-2, 6-1. Screens, you see fragments of the match between Michael Stich and Carlos Costa, which ended in favor of the German players 6-3, 6-4. Good evening. Gradually, daylight is increasing, but the sun on the horizon does not appear that often. The reason for that is Atlantic cyclones, which bring warm and humid air onto the continent. This process is observed all through this winter, and in the next few days there will be no significant changes in the weather expected. On the Kola Peninsula in the north of the Arkhangels district and the Nenets Autonomous District in the Republic of Komi and the Volga-Vyatsk region, it will be cloudy with some light snow, temperatures through the night and day from 0 to -5. In the central region, the Leningrad district, Karelia, and on the majority of the Arkhangels district, atmospheric fronts from the west will bring cloudy and weather and precipitation. Temperatures as previously will be around 0. The territory of the northwest area, the Baltic countries, and the Kaliningrad district, this front will pass through at night, and precipitation will cease gradually after noon. The sun will peak out, but it will be windy, temperatures from +2 to 7. That same atmospheric front will influence the weather in Belarus, the west of Ukraine, and in Moldova. Here it will be cloudy with some patches of rain during the day, +4 to 9. In Moldova, +10 to 15. The rest of the parts of Ukraine, central Chernozem area and the lower Don area, under the influence of light anticyclone. Here it's partly cloudy without significant precipitation during the day. +2 to 7 in Rostov-on-the-Don, +4 to 6 with some light rain. The same weather is expected on the central and lower Volga. During the day, -2 +3. In the Stavropol and Krasnodar Rim areas, and also in the republics of the Northern Caucasus, in the zone of the lethargic front, it's cloudy with some isolated rains, and in the mountain snowslide danger, +7 to 12 in northern Ossetia, Ingushetia, Chechnya, +3 to 8 degrees. In the south of Dagestan, up to +10. On the Black Sea coast, there will be some patches of light rain around Sochi, +9 to 11 degrees. Beyond the Caucasus, it's warm, +8 to 13, but rainy. In St. Petersburg, cloudy in the morning, precipitation at night around 0 during the day, +1 to 3 degrees. In the capital and suburbs, prevalence of cloudy weather in the afternoon, snow mixed with rain in the morning and evening, patches of fog. Temperatures at night 0 -2 during the day, +1 to 3 degrees with icy road conditions. The forecast was compiled on the data from the Oceanic Meteorological Center. That completes our broadcast. All the very, very best, and goodbye.